This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Oh, like I said, we feel confident where our game's at. We've had a good preseason, a lot of good wins, and a lot of good things to learn from. So, like I said, it's all about just trying to go out and execute our game plan and get off to a good start here.
Execute the game plan. Love that. Still a lot of people heated over our conversation yesterday.
Wow, we've had a lot of news since we went off the air yesterday.
Darn Florida Panthers.
Well, I will just come out and say, Greg,
Please.
I actually have some notes written down here, which I don't normally do because there are a few topics I want to hit. And I will just tell you and the fans, I am giving myself the grace to change my mind on one thing I said yesterday. So we'll get to that among the other things that I've written down, which are probably at the forefront of the minds of our listeners and viewers. But we should probably recap what happened yesterday since we went off the air.
Let's do that. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we acknowledge our wonderful sponsor partner.
Yes, please do.
Because I want to make sure that they get the proper recognition. You can enjoy some Reef Rum, smooth, versatile, and now pouring at every bar at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Reef Rum, that's a premium craft, Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Reef Rum by name. Go Bolts. Enjoy responsibly. All right, so let's get to some of the news we saw yesterday, partner, come down, because I think a lot of people, after they saw fines and things that were coming down, you know, one of the popular questions we were getting, and suspensions, of course, you know, why is this happening to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and why didn't it happen to the Florida Panthers? But, you know, we can kind of break off in there. J.J. Moser suspended 2 games, partner, for boarding. And, you know, you and I talked at great length about Moser's hit. We also talked about Verhaeghe's hit.
Yeah.
You know, quite frankly. And, you know, obviously,
and again, thanks to the league for providing some clarifying words. Lightning fans may not like what the league had to say about it, but they didn't have to get back to us. And based on what we heard yesterday from the league, when you look at the Moser play, there is no question Moser sees Boquist's numbers and kind of keeps moving in a straight line. So understanding what we heard from the league, I'm not shocked. I was hopeful that maybe they'd be like, oh, let's just not give him a suspension. After the hearing, they decided to suspend him. They suspended him 2 games. So 2 games in the regular season is less than 2 games in the playoffs. Like, a playoff suspension is kind of worth more than a regular season suspension, but 2 games is not great. So the Lightning have to open the season with the 2 games at home without J.J. Moser. Fortunately, they have 6 other defensemen. But again, you know, when you look at how they explained that play in the video, they kept talking about Moser had Boquist in front of him and did not change course. So consistent with what we heard specifically about the Verhaeghe hit on Girgensons, which was a different sort of hit. Boarding, yes. I don't want the fans to get up in arms about it, but different in that, like, Girgensons at the sideboards, for that hit to be similar to the Moser hit, Verhaeghe would have had to come across the ice. You know what I'm saying? So I think for the league, the fact that Verhaeghe was coming down the boards and the hit was on the sideboards made it different than the Moser hit.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that. Scott Sauber, not so lucky. All right, he got hit with 4 games based off of his actions with Aaron Ekblad. And then there were a bunch of fines thrown the Lightning's way.
Well, 2 of them we knew about to the players.
Yeah.
But then, you know, it came down fairly late. So the suspensions came down late afternoon, one after the other. But they did the Sauber one first. So I was like, maybe Moser is going to, you know, get out of this without a suspension. No, that one came down. And it was probably about 6:30 p.m. that the league announced that the Lightning as an organization had been fined $100,000 and John Cooper fined $25,000. We see this. It's not common. We see it sometimes. And again, I'm speaking a little bit out of ignorance here, but I'm fairly certain. I'm certain enough to say it on the air. And if somebody needs to correct me, correct me. I don't believe when a team gets fined or a coach gets fined, that comes from the Department of Player Safety. It's the Department of Player Safety, right? I think this came from the league separate department where it may have been right at the top. Who knows? So it is not unheard of. We see it sometimes. Like if things go off the rails on the ice, sometimes a coach does get a fine because the coach is kind of the one in control of the players on the bench, right? So if a player on the bench goes on the ice and does something, sometimes the coach gets tagged as well. I think they added that component a couple of years ago, Greg. Like if you get an instigation penalty, maybe near the end of a game, there's a more like they don't want when the game is over, they don't want fights starting.
Right.
So I think a player and a coach would face punishment if that's the case because the coach is putting the player out there,
sure.
Right? It's rare. It's not unheard of, but the Lightning got this fine, and I'm sure the fans are wondering, well, why did the Lightning get a fine, and why did the Panthers not get a fine? And we can kind of get into that. But that came down fairly late yesterday, and the Lightning have the day off today. They're coming back from Naples, so if anyone is asked about it, if Coop is asked about it, it won't be until tomorrow, and I'd be very surprised if they have any comment. Other than just
what are they going to say?
Yeah, we'll take the fine. But remember yesterday on the show, you were like, well, the league is talking to the Lightning and Panthers. What could they be talking about? Maybe they were getting information, and then they decided, based on what they heard, to levy these fines.
It takes, in an instance like that, it takes two to tango. Hard to come down on one side and not really on the other. Both teams were part of the situation, and one could argue that it did start from a Florida player the game before.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely started.
So this should be part of the
Florida player the game before.
This should be part of it. The evaluation, the suspensions, the fines. And I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of Lightning fans in this instance to say it feels like we got taken to the woodshed a bit here for something that, let's face it, we weren't dealing with angels on the other side, and what was the the quote Paul Maurice was saying about firefighters and firemen?
Well, he's always got a pithy quote. We like to hit players with pucks or whatever, and then the next game, Matthew Tkachuk goes out of his way to hit Kensel when he doesn't have a puck. Anyway, so there is some information here that we don't have, and unlike the Verhaeghe play with Girgensons, we are not going to get any information from the league about what may or may not have transpired. I'm just going to put this forward as hypotheticals, but potential explanations for why the ruling came down the way that it did. We had the Thursday game. The league was not thrilled with the Thursday game, but the Thursday game was the first game. They know the teams are meeting again on Saturday. It is possible, and again, I have no information verifying this or not verifying this, but let's just say it this way. If a conversation was had with the Lightning and Panthers in between the two games, let's make sure we don't go across the line on Saturday. And I think everybody who watched the game on Saturday, listened to the game on Saturday, heard us talk about the game on Saturday, the Lightning were the aggressors. There's no question. At the beginning of the game, they were the aggressors. I think after that, it was probably a little bit more give and take. I mean, Jonah Gadjevich kind of went out of his way at the first period conclusion to start picking fights, and he got a game misconduct. But if that was the case, the punishment was really tied to you were given a directive and you didn't follow it. I don't know if that happened. Maybe it didn't. I believe that the league believes it did what it needed to do. Okay? I think the Thursday game they kind of put that in the rearview mirror as this was an ugly game, but let's look forward and see what happens in the next game. So the Panthers were the aggressors on Thursday, and the fact that they were the aggressors on Thursday led to Saturday. But if that is kind of put in the rearview mirror, the league is like, all right, well, this is what we told you if this happened. I'm trying to understand in my own head, like, why the league did this. The Lightning were the aggressors on Saturday, and it clearly didn't please the league. You yourself said on the show yesterday, Greg, you heard from a lot of people who were not thrilled with what happened on Saturday. They just didn't. We've talked about it. Even after the Thursday game,
Sure.
You were kind of like, this is kind of getting old. This isn't entertaining. And the league is very sensitive to that. Very sensitive to that. What was everybody in the sports world talking about as it related to hockey after the Saturday game? The 322 penalty minutes. And,
for sure.
I can understand why the league was not thrilled that this was a talking point. Okay. Now, I have my talking points. I think I have 4 of them written down here, and this is one of them. Whether the league felt that this was appropriate based on what they know and we may not know is secondary in some ways to the fact that the optics of this are very, very bad for the league. They may feel that based on what they needed to do, they did the right thing. But when you have, and I'll call them neutral hockey reporters, analysts, podcasters, who have no dog in the hunt here, Greg, are looking at this and saying, this doesn't smell right. Why is only one team getting punished? That is a bad look for the league. You don't have to like the Lightning to be able to say that. Now, there are some teams like the enemy of my enemy is my friend type situation, right? Like some other fan bases are like, we don't like the Panthers either based on what happened. Maybe we saw them in the playoffs. Our team saw them in the playoffs, whatever. We don't think that this is right either. But in a game that featured 322 penalty minutes, it's not as if the Lightning had 300 of those penalty minutes and the Panthers only had 22. So if you are not really clued in to what has been going on here, and you just look at, okay, these two teams had 2 huge penalty minute games. There were lots of fights. To your point, takes 2 to tango. Why is only one team getting punished in terms of fines, suspensions, and a fine to the team and to the coach? Yes, AJ Greer got a fine on Thursday, but that was it. So it does look like the Lightning were the team that was punished way more severely. And in some world, if like there are people out there who are like, okay, well, we know exactly what's going on, this is entirely appropriate, it's almost secondary to the fact that as much as the league probably wasn't thrilled with how Saturday's game went, this decision reflects poorly on the league from an optics standpoint. I believe that. If you got neutral people looking at this and being like, what? How is this possible? That is a bad look for the league. It reeks of favoritism. I don't know if there was favoritism, but I'm saying like that is how it plays from people who are seeing the after effect of this and the part that came down from the league. I don't know if you have more to add to it, but
I think in many ways the NHL, I don't want to say picking and choosing who they come down on with something like that is a little disingenuous. The league's had a image problem for a while in terms of what does everybody tune in to see that's the casual fan. And a lot of times it is the fights and stuff that we saw the other day. Not all games, but this is the perception problem that they are dealing with. I will just say it takes 2 to create a situation like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm going to say. I mean, the Lightning aren't out there fighting themselves. There's a reason why they responded the way they did. You can say they went over the line, and that's fine. If you want to suspend guys, which the league did, if you want to fine the organization and the coaches and the players, fine. That's your prerogative. But let's not make it seem like the other side didn't have anything to do with it, because in many instances, had you been following the previous game, you would have seen that the Panthers, no doubt, led the Lightning to that situation.
Yeah.
So I just think in this instance,
And that is what the casual observer will if they aren't skeptical about it, that is what the casual observer will take from this, which is, boy, one team must have done, they started the whole thing and they are mostly responsible based on kind of the fines and the suspensions that were doled out in the aftermath.
There's context.
And most people who follow the game are like,
yeah.
I was doing an interview with a guy in Edmonton, actually, when the news broke. And, okay, Edmonton, he's a radio host in Edmonton. But, I mean, like, yeah, they lost to the Panthers in the final the last 2 years. But, I mean, he just likes hockey, right? And even he saw this. He's like, what? How is this possible? There was another team on the ice involved in this. Anyway, my second bullet point. I'm going to change course on something I said yesterday. The fans, I think it was one fan, but I think other fans took up the the cry on this, which was AJ Greer should have been suspended for what he did on Thursday. And when we had a fan mention that, I said on the show yesterday, I didn't think that really rose to the level of a suspension. I mean, it was unnecessary. It lit the match. I mean, I maintain all of that. But we've seen plays in which, a guy, does a cross check and, throws a gloved punch at another player. The problem was that, as we said, it was Hagel, and the second punch, he popped him, right? And Hagel had to miss the rest of the game. So why am I changing my mind on this? Do I think that everything would have settled down if they had thrown AJ Greer out of the game and suspended him? Maybe not. I mean, because he did what he did to Hagel. And I think the Lightning's reaction to that was more about what Greer did to Hagel, not whatever punishment Greer got or didn't get, be that as it may. I changed my mind after hearing the league's explanation of why they suspended Sabourin. And Evan Klosky, who's a local, sports reporter, CBS affiliate, he had a great kind of monologue on his show last night, and I think he summed up a lot of this very, very well. But he referenced this, and I do agree with him. So if you watch the video that the league put out on why they decided to suspend Sabourin, and in a sense why they decided to suspend him for 4 games, there's a clause in the CBA that references "quote unquote" contact, intentional or reckless. So they felt that this fell into that category. This is actually, I listened to it again this morning. I wrote down. So this is the exact verbiage that the league used. So they felt that this was, quote, an intentional act done by a player for the purpose of retribution and message sending. I'll read it again. An intentional act done by a player for the purpose of retribution and message sending. They also said this is not a hockey play gone wrong, and that in this instance, Sabourin disregarded the play. So after he laid the first check on Ekblad, which you said was a clean hit, everyone agrees that was a clean hit, he disregarded the play. He was just interested in retribution and message sending. How is this different from what AJ Greer did? So that is the logic that they are using to suspend Sabourin. Everything I just read applies to what AJ Greer did to Brandon Hagel.
Right.
So at the time I was kind of like, but I didn't really know that this was what they took into consideration when they suspended a player. They do. So why was this same standard not used for AJ Greer? Yes, he wasn't given a major in a game or a match like Sabourin was, but the DOPS still could have gone back and said, they targeted Hagel in the series last year. What is AJ Greer doing? Was he disregarding the play? Yes. Was it a hockey play? Was it not a hockey play gone wrong? That was not a hockey play gone wrong. He targeted Hagel. Was it an intentional act done by a player for the purpose of retribution and message sending? Yes. So I take it back yesterday. I agree with the fans. I think Greer should have been suspended. I'm not convinced that it would have really changed what happened. I mean, Greer would have been out of the game, so the Radish fight with Greer wouldn't have happened on Thursday. But if Greer had played on Saturday, I mean, I'm sure that would have just been a postponement. But look, I'm happy to admit when, I feel like if I wasn't wrong yesterday, I changed my mind, and I have a right to change my mind on something.
It's a pretty logical
after you get some other information, right?
Hard to argue with any of it. It's okay to say maybe they missed it.
Yeah.
It is. It's okay to say that. Because now that you have all the context and you see what transpired and then the things that were levied down afterwards, that doesn't make too much sense. Then you move on. I don't know what else to say. I know some people got into the George Peros discussion a little bit more yesterday, almost as a reason why Florida even got off easier than they did.
That doesn't, I mean, George Peros has no, I mean, he played for the Panthers for 1 year near the end of his career. He spent most of his career playing with Anaheim.
Yeah, so that's kind of where they're going.
Yeah, I'm not gonna really change my stance on. So the one fan was talking about Colin Campbell and his connection to the Panthers, and that his son Gregory Campbell is the assistant general manager with the Panthers, and I had not remembered or known either. I heard it and forgot it because it wasn't really on my radar, or I just never heard it. There was some kind of court document that where there was a deposition given. I think it was in the Mark Savard case because Savard was seriously injured on a hit from Matt Cook, but somehow it came out that Colin Campbell tried to exert influence on referees when his son was playing. I'm just repeating kind of what some of the fans shared, and I went and looked it up, and that is true. And apparently, and this is long before I kind of was paying attention to this kind of stuff, Colin Campbell was involved in player safety, but he has not been involved in that department for well over a decade. So there's a little bit of truth in that. There is a connection there's a lot of truth in that there's a connection between Colin Campbell and Gregory Campbell, father-son. But there is some indication that there is like past evidence of the father Campbell trying to intervene on the son's behalf, but that was when the son was playing. And I will maintain I do not believe that there is any kind of intersection between kind of the DOPS and any other department. And so for the people like, well, George Peros played in Florida. Well, where else George Peros played? Princeton. You know who played in Princeton? Jeff Halpern. Now, they weren't there at the same time, but they know each other well.
Yeah.
I mean, are we saying that George Peros is going to, I mean, clearly the DOPS didn't take it easy on the Lightning, but somebody might say, well, the Lightning got it easy because George Peros is buddies with Jeff Halpern. I mean, like, hockey people know each other. They do. Now, that is different than father-son, but as I said, Colin Campbell is in hockey ops. He's not in the DOPS. But I will add one last caveat to this, Greg. The fact that I say it, and I believe this. I don't believe that there's any funny business going on here. That's almost immaterial because a lot of people do believe there is funny business. So we go back to this word again, optics. I mean, it's not great for the league if you have people all around the league who are following the league, let's say this, who are saying this, who believe it. I mean, I think a lot of people believe it. So optically, it's probably not ideal that you have an executive, a longstanding executive within the league, whose son is in management for a team that is perceived to be getting preferential treatment. So, I mean, fair. People are connecting the dots, and there are three ways to go for the league. They remove Colin Campbell from the league office. Gregory Campbell is no longer with the Florida Panthers, or they do nothing. And, to this point, they've done nothing, and the chatter will continue.
I want to get to some questions. We probably should get to some other news as well before we get into everything.
I think that this deserved.
Oh, it did.
I think this
20 minutes,
deserved our
25 minutes.
attention.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it has
for
the
sure.
fans' attention.
It does. It's not. Look, is this all going to be a moot point once the season starts? It'll be brought up again once these two teams face off.
And
I think
the Lightning did add a player, Curtis
they
Douglas.
did. Well, I
who
mean, we
is
can get
a
to that
tough
because
guy.
I find that interesting. But this isn't going to go away because I do think there is a perception among Lightning fans that the league doesn't always benefit their team when it comes to things like this or just calls in general. It's part of being a fan. I think some of it, maybe there's some legitimacy to it. I don't know. But Lightning fans are certainly going to be bringing this up when the Lightning and Panthers reenact.
And look, if the Lightning kind of use this in a way as, sort of kind of billboard material, like we were one half of this dance and we were the only ones blamed, us against the world mentality, or at least us against the Panthers in the league, and they use that to fuel them this season, I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I don't either. I do find the Lightning adding Curtis Douglas to their roster. I saw this, and I forgive me, partner, I had to say, who is this?
Yeah, I've never seen him before because he's only played in the minors.
He's huge, 6'9". I mean, he's listed at 242. Who knows how that plays out? He had a couple of fights for Utah, which is where he started this preseason, and apparently handled himself really well. Is this, because now people are going to look at this and say, is this in some ways a direct result of what happened with the Florida Panthers? And is this the way of Julian saying, potentially, it's something that we needed to address, even though you and I were pretty much like, look, Lightning have some guys who can handle themselves, but did they feel like other people are going to take some liberties against this team and that they really do need a guy specific to that role to handle some business outside of anybody else who will stick up for themselves? What did you make initially of this move? And I mean, look, 6'9", he is what he is. He's not a scorer. He's not a penalty killer. I mean, maybe he did that in the minors. I mean, this guy feels like he's there. He can play a little bit, scored a couple of goals, but I mean, predominantly he is a heavyweight.
Yeah, I find the pickup to be curious because if it is kind of as a reaction to what happened with the Panthers, specific to the Panthers, the Lightning don't play the Panthers until mid-November. So is Curtis Douglas going to stay with the Lightning, a guy with 0 games of NHL experience, as just kind of an extra until they have a game where they feel they need a guy like this? I mean, I guess it's possible. We've talked about all of the other. This is why, like, waiver claims at the 11th hour are, I mean, they don't not happen. I mean, we've seen some this year, and the Lightning made 2, including Douglas. Phoenix Copley was claimed on waivers. But, the Lightning have some guys who are knocking at the door at the forward position. And I'm curious if they keep Douglas on the NHL roster through the first month and a half, until they play the Panthers, or they try and send him down. But if they send him down, he has to go through waivers again. And, there's a strong likelihood Utah would just grab him. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know. I mean, if they don't want that to happen, they basically just keep him and they use him in, I would presume, spot duty. Right?
I think that's how I would look at it.
Yeah.
Why else would you do it?
But you're filling a roster spot with a guy who was not with your organization, was not in camp, didn't perform as well as we saw in the preseason for you. I mean, apparently he performed certainly with Utah because he was one of the last players sent down. But that's why I use the word curious. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see how it plays out with the 3 goalies too.
Tampa Bay on X says Curtis Douglas on opening night roster. LOL. Cooper is setting fire to the league, and DOPS, this is going to be quite the ride.
I will be very surprised if Curtis Douglas is in the opening night lineup. I mean,
could you imagine that?
Well, they have other guys who are ahead of him who have been in the organization and played in the preseason. I mean, even without Gergensons, who did start the season on IR, Lightning put him on IR, so he's not one of the 23. And if you're on IR, you have to sit a week, right? I mean, they have 12 other forwards. Let's see. Maybe I'm wrong.
See, if he's in that first game against if he's in for the first game against the Panthers.
Right, but that's different. That's mid-November.
That's
whatever,
we'll
6 weeks away.
You must, in part, bring this guy to your organization because you feel collectively you need somebody to handle that rough stuff. You just have to.
Right.
By the way, did you know Tanner Jeannot and Mikey Asimont
yes,
are on the Boston Bruins? And I don't know
that.
why. I think I had the NHL Network on when I was up with Enzo this morning real early, and they had them on a third line together. Now, that can change, obviously, but I was like, wow. First off, Tanner Jeannot's in Boston. That'll be interesting. And Asimont. That'll be very interesting.
Mikey's bounced around. I like Asimont as a player. I mean,
that'll have some jam to that. That line will have some jam for sure.
He's got sneaky good skill. I mean, Lightning fans know that.
I wonder if Tanner Jeannot kind of changed. I don't want to say change his game because I think he is who he is.
I mean, he kind of played the way he played with the Lightning, with the Kings last year, and was kind of on their fourth line and then out of the lineup. And they didn't stick with him, right?
But he's a huge human being. Like he's a big, thick guy.
He's a tough guy.
He is. You just wonder if a guy like
look,
that.
The Lightning play the Bruins in the third game, but I mean, I don't know. Like, I think to your point, the Lightning added a big, strong enforcer to their organization. But unless they decide to keep him at the NHL level, he's going to have to go through waivers again, and there is if not a strong likelihood, there is a likelihood that he will get reclaimed by the team that surrendered him in the first place.
But for them to even pick up a guy like that, there is a little bit of self-admission that we need to address this. I don't know. That's just my spidey sense right there. Huntrell says on YouTube, the new waiver claim seems to be just more of a big body than a skill thing. And he's on opening night roster. Is this just a just-in-case tough guy we carry around with us? And it's what we were just kind of debating.
And just to point out, like the opening night roster, which is the group of 23 the Lightning submitted yesterday, that may change between now and Thursday.
Yeah.
I mean, once the season starts, you can make roster moves.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the Lightning do, if anything, between now and Thursday.
Ben on X said, Frank Saravelli reported that Campbell's department levied the fines to the Bolts and Cooper. Does the NHL realize how bad the optics are on this?
Well, that was the word I used. So the fines to the team and the coach, that's why I even said that. I wasn't sure that came from the DOPS. So that part would have come from a different part of the NHL. Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to argue with the optics of it. But I think that there may be, I'll repeat what I said at the top of the show, there may have been something happening that we don't know about in advance of Saturday's game, and the league got ticked off by the fact that the Lightning were the ones to initiate at the beginning.
You know,
of the
it would
game.
be interesting if there was any other games between two teams over the last handful of years to do some sort of comparison, some sort of analysis. Because for them to react this way, the way they did on the Lightning, it's not the first time they've encountered two teams that have had a bloodbath. Now, maybe you can say it stood out more because this was preseason. Maybe it stood out more because it's the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. You know what? The other thing, too, is you want to avoid some of this nonsense? How about not have the teams play 3 times in a row in preseason?
Well, the league doesn't choose that. The teams choose their preseason schedule.
Maybe we need to back off on that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe we do.
The preseason's shorter next year.
Thank goodness.
We'll see if the teams play at all next year.
Good point by you.
It's possible.
Sprocket on X. Now, this is a good one. I appreciate your hockey analytics and the extent to which you do your best to eliminate bias from your analysis. However, in capital letters, there are times I wish you two could infuse a little more emotion in your presentation. I'm a longtime Bull for life, and I'm incensed over the apparent bias the league has demonstrated in the manner in which it doled out suspensions and fines to the Lightning alone.
Look, I was not happy either. What was the person's name?
Sprocket.
Sprocket.
I agree with
So
you. I just said I agree
this is
with
not
you.
a show. This is not a show for screaming and yelling and rah rah. However, I think as it relates to this Hagel situation, at least for me personally, Greg, if you listen to the shows that we had during the series last year, and even the Friday show coming after the Thursday preseason game, I was getting pretty fired up. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I agree.
I didn't like it at all. But Sprocket, I mean, the first part of your post is accurate. Like, we do try and have measured takes on things. But we were definitely slanted to the Lightning and toward the Lightning. We're a Lightning show.
You have covered this a lot, the league, and so have I. I have learned not to get too emotional in a situation like this because I think the league has had a lot of self-inflicted wounds over the years. And you've heard me say this a number of times. I think the league, Sprocket, has done a poor job in not only promoting its best players, but protecting its best players. And when you can allow the shenanigans that occurred not only between Tampa Bay and Florida the last 2 preseason games, but over the course of the last decade, last 20, 25 years, you can go as far back as whenever, you've got to understand that until the league in some ways gets serious about eliminating all of that stuff from their league, you're going to have these situations pop up where it feels like you're moving the goalposts in terms of how you are handling these fines and suspensions, because there really isn't, for me at least, a lot of consistency with how it's done. Even this one specifically, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm not getting overly emotional about it because in many ways I kind of expected it. I acknowledge they have a hard job to do, but I think they have a hard job to do in part because there's some self-inflicted wounds within those departments because they're sometimes not willing to make the hard decisions. And I think that has been an issue for a long time. It's part of the reason why Mary Lemieux retired early, called it a garage league, because he felt like guys were taking liberties at him, swinging at him, and you can go down a laundry list of high-end players who have felt that maybe the league hasn't taken care of them, but maybe they look out for some of the guys who are considered enforcers or grinders even more so. You can debate that if you want. My point stands. I think there's been a lot of inconsistencies with how these things have been handled over the years, and I am not surprised that one team got more of the infractions than the other, even though anybody who's watched these two teams play over the last 2 to 3 years, and even the last 2 preseason games, would say, yeah, the Lightning are at fault, but why do you think the Lightning are at fault? What did the Panthers do to have that type of reaction? And I think we missed a big opportunity there, but I'm not surprised.
And you said on yesterday's show you'd like to see more suspensions.
If you're really trying to clean up the league.
Yeah, that would be one way to go.
That would be my thing.
And actually, what I have heard from certainly our listeners' comments, just generally in the last, 18 hours, less ire and anger about the punishment the Lightning got. And it's more about the fact that the Panthers didn't get anything other than Greer with the fine.
That's it. And that's where...
So it's not so much that Lightning fans are like, we can't believe that the league levied these punishments on us. It's that, what about the other team?
I mean, that's the point. You know, if you have 2 guys square off, okay, yeah, maybe one instigates, but the other guy's going to the box too, and maybe he gets thrown out, depending on the actions. It takes 2 to have a type of reaction the Lightning had. And for us, for the league collectively to miss the boat on that, I guess I could say I'm shocked, but I'm not. So I try not to get too emotional, Sprocket, because I think I have seen too many instances where the penalty doesn't seem rational. The fine doesn't seem rational for both parties. And it's unfortunate that the Lightning took the brunt of this one more so than the Panthers. And, you know, that's kind of where we are. Chris on X says, why was there no suspension for Panther players staying in the game after being ejected? I thought that was an automatic, and yet the league didn't even give them that. Would love to hear the explanation.
Sorry. So the explanation, I think, is that it was just missed, and people, they missed it. They did announce his name. There was a lot happening. I mean, yes, I was in the booth by myself trying to track all of this stuff, and it was very, very difficult. I believe that it was an oversight. I believe that, I mean, there is an argument to be made that maybe Nico Mikkola, who's an NHL veteran, would be like, peace out. I'm taking the rest of the game off. Sure. I think that he didn't actually know that he was thrown out of the game. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure that they announced, I'm not listening to the PA announcement, but the ref mic was on, and I heard the ref say, he may have just said 77 game misconduct. If Mikkola's not paying attention to that, somebody needs to get him and be like, you're out. Right. I think that's what happened.
I think this is also, too, this is a small
But yes, the fan is correct. Yeah. Like, if you were a player who was given a game misconduct and you're like, no, I'm going to stay in the game, then yes, you get suspended. I don't think that this was that. I think that this was Penn Station at rush hour with a lot happening, and it got missed.
It's why it's also super important. I think some refs, partner, do it better than others, but get on that mic and explain what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is important for everybody in that audience to know, hey, this guy game misconduct, this guy 5 for fighting, and at least give everybody in the arena an opportunity.
Some referees do that.
Some do, but I still think it's missing a little bit from everybody. I actually think that should be required. I also would have loved to have heard from the officials after the game.
Yeah.
And I know that doesn't always happen, but
no, it doesn't.
I almost think, now correct me if I'm wrong, they're not obligated to speak to the media. It's not a requirement, but if they do they have, in certain instances though, don't they talk to maybe somebody who's taking notes? And
if anyone, I think the supervisor, and I'm not sure if they even have a supervisor for preseason games.
Yeah.
They probably had one on Saturday based on what happened on Thursday. Sometimes the supervisor will talk to the teams, but I don't know that there's a lot of talk with the media. That's why a guy like Dave Jackson on the broadcast, I think he's with ESPN, like that's very valuable because he can give an explanation because he knows.
But I want to hear
the
from
rules
the person.
So well.
Well, that's fine, but I want to hear what the official, what was he thinking? And in fairness, I don't think any of the other major sports have that. At least I can't remember where an official's coming on to speak about the game. And maybe it's for their own good, but can we find some middle ground? Maybe not
a
somebody
spokesperson.
Can we have somebody like, especially in a game that I don't want to say that was important because that's drastically different than the playoffs, but I think it would have been kind of neat to have somebody, hey, this is what we saw, and have people ask those questions. I mean, we're all about transparency, at least I hope.
Yeah.
Let's help us understand the process. Barkley on YouTube says, any chance Connor Geeky knows the new acquisition since he was in the Utah-Arizona system?
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure he does. For camp. I mean, Geeky didn't play in the minors. But they would have had, training camp together.
You would have thought. 6'9". So that means on skates, he's 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
I mean, basically. I mean, that's... Dustin on X says, I was curious because I haven't been able to find this information. Did the Lightning claim Curtis Douglas after we received the $100,000 plus $25,000 fine? If we did claim him after that, then I say, finally, bravo, JBB. Perfect message to tell the league we are doubling down and won't be pushed around. We don't need Douglas to play every night, but it's a good piece to have to rotate into the lineup occasionally. Side note, yesterday the power play was mentioned 0 times on the show. Side note, the claim would have been made on Sunday well before the fines.
So I think it is extremely unlikely, Dustin, that they put the claim in after they knew about the fine. The fine was not announced until, like I said, I think 6:30 Eastern or so last night. Now, is it possible the Lightning were given a heads up? Possible. But remember, Douglas was put on waivers the day before, and teams have like 24 hours to put a claim in, and that's why 2 o'clock. So like 2 p.m. yesterday, Declan Carlisle, who had been put on waivers the day before, cleared. Douglas didn't clear. So the Lightning put their claim in. Probably the latest they put their claim in was probably like late morning yesterday, and I don't think they would have known about the fine. The stronger likelihood is they probably put their claim in the night before. It's almost like a silent auction, and if anyone puts a bid in, that team gets the player, and if not, they have the reverse record. I think that's the order of priority for claiming a player.
It is all interesting when you start talking about the claim and how the Lightning are going to use Curtis Douglas, though. I do think this is going to be something we keep an eye on. Craig on YouTube says, I realize the NHLPA would not agree. Raise the fines for the player to the level that the coaches and teams get fined.
Yeah.
Money hurts. I could see that happening. Dio on YouTube says, I'm not a big fan of Nick Paul. Surprised to see he had 41 points last year on a third line. What is his upside in a top 6 role? I do prefer an enforcer-type player because I think Paul's game lacks physicalness.
Well, I disagree, Dio. I think Nick Paul does play a physical brand of hockey. He's got a great shot.
Yeah.
And he is a very versatile player. He can play center. He can play wing. He's got skill. He's pretty good defensively. And, I mean, he used the word enforcer on a top 6. I mean, maybe he meant something else, but usually if you have a quote-unquote enforcer, that player is not in the top 6. Now, can you have tough, rugged players play in the top 6? Sure. I mean, in his heyday, Milan Lucic was in the top 6, and he was a tough as nails, hard to play against guy. I think I saw he may be with a team this year. Maybe I saw that wrong. Anyway, that's just the example of that sort of player, but they are kind of unicorns. That's not typical. Geeky, if we feel Geeky at some point is going to be in a top 6, if not this year, then down the road, he would want to play a physical game and he could fight, but would you call him an enforcer? So I guess I would probably choose a slightly different word, but Nick Paul has been a very effective player for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but everyone has their own opinion about what they may like or dislike, if that's the right word, or like less about a player than other players.
Yeah, I think Nick Paul, because of his shot and I think his playmaking ability, and when he first came over, he was incredible. There's a tendency to look at him and say top 6 talent, and maybe that is true, but for the Lightning, is he best served in a top 6 role? Who are you going to knock out? And the question, I think, with Paul is wing or center. Are you a better team with Nick Paul as your centerman in the third line? Lightning are a pretty deep team in their top 6.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that I would look to would be, can you find Nick Paul, and I think they may have it this year, a couple of wingers who have a certain skill set that allows him to drive play a little more consistently. And I think that's fine. I think Nick Paul has been, I don't want to say revelation, but I'm not sure Ottawa thought that production was in him.
Yeah.
And I think you can make a case he has, I don't want to say over-delivered for the Lightning, but I didn't expect
what he was
provided.
Everyone wants to grade a trade as soon as it happens, and the cooler minds are always like, you need to wait a bit and see. I mean, there's no question the Lightning won that trade. Matthew Joseph is no longer with Ottawa. He's been with 2 other organizations since then. We had a fan write in, Lucic was on a PTO with St. Louis and got injured. So good for Lucic. He's still, to the point that he's getting invited to camps. So, I do want to mention the 4th point that I wrote down, just because I think that it does tie back to what we've been talking about for much of the last 2 days. But honestly, I was kind of surprised to see this. So the Panthers unveiled their championship rings. Did you see this, Greg?
I didn't.
Okay. So it's big, it's glitzy, like most of the championship rings in this day and age. But they actually have written on the ring, I guess this was kind of a locker room credo that they used last year. I don't think they just came up with it for the ring, but it's something that they say. If they put it on the ring, it had significance to the group. So on the part of the ring where they have the 4 teams they beat, Tampa Bay, Toronto, Carolina, and Edmonton, with a line through each team. Above it, it says, "We apologize to no one," which is a very curious saying, because when I read that, the first thing I thought was, well, what is it that people would want them to apologize for? And they are rebelling against that. Like they're wearing it as a badge of honor. Is it that they won back-to-back cups? Well, I mean, the Lightning won back-to-back cups, and nobody was like demanding apologies from them. When the Penguins won back-to-back cups in 2016 and 2017, it's not like there was an outcry for like they should be apologizing for somehow their actions or behaviors demanded an apology, and they were rebelling against that. So only they know exactly what kind of the implication of this means. Are they brash? I mean, we saw that in their championship revelry last year, and that's certainly within their prerogative to be that way. And maybe some people took that the wrong way because the hockey credo is kind of modest, right? And not brash. And they were very brash in how they celebrated. And again, like that's their prerogative. But you may say that, they're not apologizing for, and Evan Klosky put it this way. I thought he put it in a very appropriate way, blurring the line between physical and dirty. And we have heard this, like I don't frame it that way. I'm like, look, the Panthers, I've said this on the show, the Panthers play a street brawlers type of game. That's not the only thing that they bring to the ice, but they have that in them. And we see players who come to them who adapt that philosophy. We have another one, Luke Kunin. How many teams has Luke Kunin played for in the NHL? He comes to the Panthers this year, and he's got extra snarl to his game. This is part of how they play. So the fact that they put that on their ring, if it is related to that, means that on some level, wink, wink, nod, nod, they know. They know that they are, as Evan put it, blurring the line between physical and dirty, and people are not happy about it, and they are like, we apologize to no one. This is who we are. Again, I'm kind of throwing things out there. I'm not sure if that's it, but I was very curious to see that was important enough to them that they put it on their ring for all eternity. However these rings last, however long these rings last, that will be part of their second cup, that this is how they view themselves. Yeah. And I'm sorry, Greg, that is not really the hockey way. The hockey way is not being that brash and boastful, but they kind of have carved their own path, clearly. And maybe it's not that. Maybe it's related to something else. But I saw that, and I wanted to bring it up on the show. And I heard Evan reference it. And he basically ended with, well, maybe they feel they don't have to answer. They don't have to apologize to anyone, but they may have to answer. That's kind of how he put it. And the Lightning made them answer for what happened on Thursday between Greer and Hagel.
I will say this. Anytime you play the Florida Panthers, it will be interesting. And I think every league needs a team where you look at them and say, I don't like them. I just don't like them. I think every league has teams like that. The Florida Panthers, in part, maybe in large part, it's because they've won so much, just like the Lightning did. And so you have a bullseye on your back. Maybe the way they go about it, certain style of play, the Sam Bennetts, the Kachucks, even Reinhart. Mm-hmm. Since he's been a member of the Panthers, there's this feistiness, and Ekblad. You have a lot of guys there that it's easy not to like. Okay.
I mean, we talked about it was Kulikov who had that huge hit in the Ranger series.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago. We were talking about that as it related to the Hagel hit. It's like that Kulikov play didn't get a suspension, but Hagel did last year. That was a vicious hit, open ice hit.
It was.
Anyway, we don't have to talk anymore about the Panthers until the teams meet in 6 weeks.
People
but they
get
are
frustrated
the first
when we
game
do,
tonight.
but like it's
yeah. I mean,
a
look,
big deal.
I think that
It's
they
a
are
big
the
deal.
top dog. They are also the Lightning's biggest rival, and they've beaten the Lightning the last 2 years in the first round. So I think that while the Panthers are not necessarily the top of everyone's favorite team list around the league, it carries even more kind of spice and vinegar, in Bolt's nation, because, they've been the team to knock the Lightning out, and they've won the cup back-to-back years.
Yeah. Local Nomag on YouTube says, will we break down the matchup with Ottawa tomorrow? Should be a good test. Oh, I like the word
Yeah, I
test
was
out of the
looking
gates.
at Ottawa's. Let me pull it up again so I can take a look. I was looking at Ottawa's opening night roster, and they have a lot of their same guys back from last year. Interesting, they added Lars Eller. He's a good player, but I mean, really, it's gonna come down to guys like Jake Sanderson, Shabbat, Giroux is back, Stützle. Obviously, Brady Tkachuk. I mean, their main guys are their main guys, and they are going to be the ones to lead the way for Ottawa. They made that trade with Buffalo. They got Dylan Cousins, and I think they're pretty happy to get him. I mean, he finished out last year with them. He's a guy I always liked in Buffalo, but was playing on some teams that just never did any well. We've seen a lot of examples of guys in Buffalo who are good players not have success in Buffalo, either individually or as part of a team, and they go to another team and they do quite well. You mentioned Reinhart. I mean, he's certainly an example. Notably Jack Eichel, but I mean, those are just two of the examples. So we'll see if the same holds true for Dylan Cousins.
I think tomorrow maybe we also get into the Connor McDavid deal.
Yeah.
And what does that
2-year
mean?
deal, interestingly.
Yeah. What does that mean for the market? I was reading a pretty good article. I think it might have been from The Athletic about what does it mean for players who thought they were going to get a bigger payday. That if McDavid takes less, does that force the market to respond accordingly? I don't know if that's true, but I think it's worth having some of those conversations for sure. And then maybe we'll have a guest on tomorrow too. We'll look to maybe have somebody on as we get set
Well,
for that
we've
opener.
tried a couple of times with Brian, so maybe we can get Brian Engblom on.
Maybe we can get Brian.
He played in an era when the stuff that happened on Thursday and Saturday was commonplace.
Yeah.
At the NHL level, but especially in the minors. I mean, he was telling stories when he was playing in the AHL of they played Rochester, the rival of the Montreal affiliate. He's like, one year we played them 17 times. Just bench clearing brawls all the time. So he knows what that's like.
I
mean,
think
we
it's
don't have bench
hard.
clearing brawls anymore,
Yeah.
but
I think it's hard too for players who came up in that era and kind of see what the league is trying to do now and have those. Steve, you want me to read that again? I will. I can read it again. I think it's hard for sometimes the old guard and the new guard when we start talking about where the league is today compared to where it was 20, 25 years ago, because you get the sense that that's still very much part of the fabric of the NHL to a lot of those guys who came up and experienced bench clearing brawls. So when they see something like between Tampa Bay and Florida the other day, for them it's not a big deal. But you do also know that the league is trying to clean some things up as well. And I think for that to happen, everybody's going to need to buy in a little bit there. And you do get a sense that I'm not sure the league is fully committed in doing that, because that has been part of the league's DNA for so long. How do you get rid of that? Fighting is probably the elephant in the room. We can talk more about this tomorrow. But, Brian, it'll be good because I think he's seen it from both sides. And I think what brings everybody to the table is the safety of the players at this point. And the injuries and the head injuries especially, and really trying to protect everyone. And how do you really go about change in a way that everybody buys in and is really following the rules and everything that's trying to be implemented today? It's hard to do. And I'm not sure the league is there yet. But we'll talk more about it tomorrow. We'll get into the contracts and Lightning and Sens coming up on Thursday. And, of course, taking your calls, or your tweets, I should say, and getting them on the air. Partner, great job. As always,
Yeah,
we'll
you
do it again
too.
tomorrow, noon to 1.
Thanks for all the input.
Yeah, everybody was
fans as
great.
well.
Appreciate that at Bolts Radio. Keep them coming. Thanks to Steve Versnick as well, Jared Johnston. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch right here on Lightning Radio.